She hit her own child, then became America's cowgirl queen. Born dirt poor in Texas, Dale Evans stormed radio stages, survived 3 failed marriages, and let Hollywood sell her son as a kid brother. A baby's tragic death lit her faith on fire, turning her into the gospel gunslinger who took on Congress, from runaway bride at 14 to legend beside Roy Rogers. This wild, untold saga will shatter everything you know about the West's golden couple. Picture a chilly Halloween dawn in 1912, when the dusty crossroads of Uvalde, Texas, welcomed a baby girl who would one day be crowned the Queen of the West. Frances Octavia Smith entered a world of clapboard houses, cotton lint, and hardscrabble hope, hardly the stuff of Hollywood. Her parents, Betty Sue Wood and T. Hillman Smith, hustled through the lean years of early 20th century Texas, clinging to odd jobs while opportunity seemed to drift farther down the road with every passing freight train. Stability was a luxury they couldn't afford, so young Frances was shipped to live with her uncle, Dr. L.D. Massey, an Arkansas physician whose orderly household offered shelter but little warmth. Behind the whitewashed porch rails, she tasted structure, yet hungered for belonging, a quiet ache that shaped her restless spirit. By 14, loneliness fused with adolescent daring, and Frances made a razor-sharp decision. She eloped with Thomas F. Fox, a man scarcely older than the ink on their hastily signed license. What felt like a jailbreak into romance swiftly turned into the first hard lesson of adulthood. Within a year, she was no longer a schoolgirl but a mother, cradling infant Thomas Jr. in a cramped Memphis boarding room while her husband disappeared into the great American elsewhere. At 16, divorced, broke, and lugging both a baby and society's scorn, she faced an era that offered single mothers little more than pity or condemnation. Yet necessity uncovered her hidden trump card, a rich, velvety singing voice that could coax dimes from radio listeners and hope from vacant nights. With a battered piano and a willingness to work any microphone that would have her, Frances began the slow, defiant climb from abandoned teenager to self-made star, long before the world learned to call her Dale Evans. Fast forward to a smoke-hazed Louisville newsroom in the early 1930s, where Frances, now balancing shorthand pads and sheet music, answered phones for WHAS. The pay was modest and the hours long, but every second she spent near that soundproof booth felt like oxygen to a drowning soul. She had already hustled through half a dozen small-town stations, trading lullabies for grocery money. Yet WHAS was different. It reached across state lines, spilling into parlors and corner cafes from Indiana to Illinois. One hectic Tuesday, the station manager burst out of the studio hallway waving a lineup change and spotted Frances humming between typewriter clacks. "Kid, that voice doesn't belong behind a desk," he barked. He offered her a late-night slot, but only if she lost the mouthful of syllables printed on her birth certificate. "Frances Octavia Smith won't fit on a marquee," he joked, scribbling alternatives in the margin of her script. They landed on Dale Evans. Dale for its crisp cowboy snap, Evans for no reason other than it danced off the tongue. The alias felt like slipping into a brand new pair of boots. Strange at first, then impossible to remove. Under the glow of the red-on-air bulb, Dale crooned torch songs, slapped boogie-woogie rhythms on the upright piano, even belted novelty numbers that had night shift switchboard operators chuckling between calls. Her range, jazz 1 minute, big band swing the next, made program directors scribble exclamation points in their logs. By 1937, Variety magazine had noticed a fresh Louisville contralto with cross-genre punch, and talent scouts from 20th Century Fox were paging her hotel suite. A whirlwind screen test in Los Angeles led to a contract thick enough to muffle the echoes of her past. Suddenly she was trading neon station clocks for studio Klieg lights, collaborating with dance band arrangers who stretched her voice across lush orchestral charts. Dale Evans, once an anonymous switchboard striker, now recorded transcontinental broadcasts beside Edgar Bergen and his wisecracking dummy, Charlie McCarthy. Proof that reinvention wasn't just possible. It could be broadcast coast to coast, spinning a runaway teen into Hollywood's next bright star. When Dale Evans stepped onto the Fox lot in the late 1930s, the studio publicity office sized her up less as a flesh-and-blood woman than as an ingredient in the Hollywood daydream factory. Executives loved her lilting drawl and down-home poise, but they worried that the gritty truth of her past, a teen elopement, a divorce record, and a toddler already learning to call her mama, would sour the fantasy they planned to sell. So, they rewrote her resume with the stroke of a press agent's pen. In gossip column interviews, Dale became a carefree ingenue devoted to mentoring her much younger brother Tommy. The boy was paraded through photo spreads in sailor suits, introduced to reporters as a sibling tagging along while his big sister chased stardom. In reality, every staged grin carried a private ache. Tommy was her son, flesh of her flesh, born in a Memphis boarding house when Dale was barely old enough to drive. Maintaining that masquerade grew even trickier once life hurled 2 more marriages at her. In 1929, she wed August Wayne Johns, a Louisville singer whose smoky baritone matched her mezzo in nightclub duets, but fizzled under the bright grind of touring. Papers finalized their divorce in 1935. No children, no assets, hardly a footnote outside Kentucky. 2 years later, she tried again with Robert Dale Butts, a brilliant arranger who could write brass charts in his sleep. Their union produced reams of sheet music, but little marital harmony. They drifted apart by 1946. The same year Dale's Hollywood contract reached full boil. Through each breakup, the studio script remained ironclad. Dale Evans was single, wholesome, and entirely unencumbered. So spotless, in fact, that fan mag editors pinned her as the all-American girl a serviceman can dream about. The charade demanded constant vigilance. Hotel registers listed Tommy under aliases. School enrollment forms masked his birth surname. Reporters who dug too deeply received polite, terse phone calls from Fox's publicity chief. Dale played along because she feared the truth might cost her hard-won spotlight. Yet, every fabricated headline chipped at her conscience. In unguarded moments, late after rap, with costume jewelry still pinching her collarbone, she stared at studio-issue dressing room mirrors and wondered how long a mother could pretend her own son was only a kid brother. The answer, she would learn, lay just beyond the horizon, waiting in the warm, steady gaze of a future co-star named Roy Rogers. Hollywood loves to advertise chemistry, yet few screen pairings ever ignite beyond the soundstage. Dale Evans and Roy Rogers proved the marvel was real, starting in 1946, when Republic Pictures cast them opposite each other in a breezy musical western. Between takes, she teased him for polishing Trigger's saddle more lovingly than his boots. He countered by sneaking hot pepper sauce into her coffee. The crew noticed the spark long before the gossip columns caught on. Every glance felt like a private joke. Every harmony line landed as if they'd rehearsed it since childhood. Dale had weathered 3 marriages that fizzled under the Klieg lights, but Roy, already dubbed the King of the Cowboys, brought a steadiness that steadied her pulse. Their courtship galloped faster than a rodeo grand entry. On New Year's Eve 1947, beneath a frosty Oklahoma moon at the Flying L Ranch, their old filming location from home in Oklahoma, the duo said, "I do." No studio handlers staged the vows. No publicist rewrote the guest list. Roy's Stetson tilted respectfully as Dale, wrapped in ivory satin with a hint of fringe, sealed her 4th and final marriage. Paparazzi's flashbulbs couldn't outshine their smiles. Almost immediately, Dale tore away the facade that had haunted her for a decade. Standing in a living room circle of family the morning after the wedding, she introduced Tommy not as little brother, but as her son. Roy, unflinching, extended a firm handshake to the teenager and said, "Welcome home, partner." Roy himself arrived with 3 youngsters in tow: Cheryl, adopted, Linda Lou, and Roy Jr., nicknamed Dusty. Where others might have seen logistical chaos, the newlyweds saw an echo of frontier wagon life. Lots of laughter, shared chores, and precious little room for ego. They later added baby Robin, whose short life reshaped their faith, then opened their hearts to 4 more adoptees. Around the dinner table, one could hear hymn fragments, playful trade-offs of cowboy slang, and Dale's gentle reminders about table manners. Professionally, the pair locked reins as seamlessly as a 2-horse team. From the theme song refrain Happy Trails, which Dale wrote on a scrap of stationery during a tour bus ride, to the 6-season run of The Roy Rogers Show, they marketed sunshine in 30-minute installments, clean shootouts, loyal horses, and morals as unbending as a mesquite fence post. Yet success never dulled their empathy. On Sunday layoffs, they visited children's hospitals in full costume, Roy letting Trigger nuzzle wheelchairs, while Dale slipped autographed hymn books into nervous palms. Their artistic alliance stretched half a century, Through network cancellations, the rock and roll explosion, and even Roy's arthritic battles that stiffened his rope hand. When the final credits rolled on Roy's life in 1998, Dale pressed his weathered palm beneath the hospice sheets and whispered the last 3 words of their signature song, "Till We Meet." She followed him home 3 years later, proof that the silver screen romance etched into American folklore was no publicity stunt, but a covenant lived, sung, and saddle-worn clear to the end. When the wedding dust settled, the ranch house filled like a frontier carousel. Roy's 3 kids, Cheryl, Linda, and little Roy Jr., jostled beside Dale's teenage Tommy, each vying for a spot at the pine plank table where grace was sung instead of spoken. The couple still wanted every chair occupied, so they opened their doors to 4 more youngsters, Mimi, Dodie, Sandy, and Debbie, handing out cowboy hats, lullabies, and the promise that love need not share blood to be real. Then, in 1950, came Robin Elizabeth, Dale's only biological daughter. Born with Down syndrome, a diagnosis most of America still whispered about, Robin's almond-bright smile rewired the entire household, teaching big brothers how to measure strength and gentleness. 23 months later, that small light dimmed forever. Grief might have shattered Dale, yet she turned loss into language, penning Angel Unaware, a mother's imagined dialogue with God that invited the nation to see special needs children as blessings, not burdens. The bestseller financed classrooms, seeded advocacy groups, and transformed Dale from silver screen cowgirl into tireless champion of inclusion. Proof that the deepest sorrow can also preach the loudest sermon. Switch on a black and white TV in 1953, and odds are the Rogers Ranch gallops across the screen. The Roy Rogers Show, 1951 to 57, looks like a breezy half-hour shoot-'em-up, yet Dale quietly sneaks kindness and scripture into prime time. While Roy ropes rustlers, she rides buttermilk into town, settles trouble with wit, then closes by crooning a hymn that hangs in the air after the credits. Offset, they board DC-3s for Billy Graham crusades, Roy strumming a road-scarred Martin, Dale's alto soaring through echoing arenas. Graham calls them proof. Hollywood can still bow its head. And the duo answers with stories of grief transmuted into faith. Sensing gold, ABC greenlights The Roy Rogers and Dale Evans Show in 1962. Comedy skits, rope tricks, gospel duets. Ratings dip, the network bails after 3 months. Unshaken, the couple rolls on to state fairs, military bases, any stage that lets them blend cowboy sparkle with salvation's message. By the 1980s, cable's Nashville network re-airs their films. Between reels, silver-haired Dale shares Bible verses and reminds late-night viewers that happy trails is more benediction than catchphrase. Entertainment remains her saddle, faith the sure-footed horse beneath. Los Angeles, 1964. The Supreme Court's ban on classroom prayer still stings, and Dale Evans will not let the matter drift into polite forgetfulness. Project Prayer packs 2,500 people into the cavernous Shrine Auditorium. Spotlights sweep across Hollywood royalty. Walter Brennan, Rhonda Fleming, Pat Boone. Yet the crowd falls silent when Dale, in a pearl-buttoned fringe-white jacket, steps to the podium. She grips the mic like a saddle horn and fires a line that ricochets off the rafters. It's high time America stood up to be counted. Let our children learn of the Lord and be free. Her plea braids politics with testimony. She speaks of tiny Robin, the Down syndrome daughter, whose brief life proved prayer can steady a bucking heart, then invites listeners back to her one-room Texas schoolhouse, where psalms followed arithmetic drills. We're not asking for a theocracy, she insists, just breathing room for faith. Thunderous amens roll down from the balcony. Boone strikes a guitar chord. The house rises in God Bless America so loud even the press corps set their pencils aside to sing. When the lights dim, volunteers haul away crates of freshly signed petitions bound for Congress. Dale slips backstage, tucking her speech into a weather-soft Bible, already mapping the next rally. For her, activism is simply evangelism wearing spurs, and the ride is far from over. If grief forged Dale's faith, words became her compass and music the map. Between takes, she hunched over a clacking Royale, hammering out Angel Unaware. Then a string of bestsellers like The Bible Tells Me So, God Is My Strength, and Happy Trails. Each chapter braided prairie snapshots with scripture, urging readers to rope hope from hardship. Royalties quietly funded special needs classrooms and church camps, proof her prose built more than applause. Soundtracks followed the sentences. In 1970s Nashville, she slipped on studio cans over silver curls and cut LPs where steel guitar met tent revival harmony. Her alto, mellowed by age yet sharpened by conviction, rapped hymns such as In the Sweet By and By in warm twang that coaxed late-night truckers to hum along I-40. DJs wedged her gospel tracks between Willie Nelson sets. Soon mailbags bulged with stories of marriages patched and prayers rekindled. By the 1990s, cable access turned her living room into a tiny chapel. A rocker, a Bible, and a single guitar were all the set required. She'd quote a psalm, croon a verse, then sign off. Friend, the trail's rough, but the guide is good. Pen and melody, twin lariats Dale Evans swung to draw wandering hearts back toward grace. Hollywood Boulevard, 1958. Tourists lean in for photos as workmen unveil a terrazzo star, reading Dale Evans, Radio. 10 blocks away, another blank panel quietly awaits her television plaque, a future salute to a career still galloping. Dale smiles for cameras, yet inwardly marvels that the runaway teen from Uvalde has her name hammered into California granite, twice. Honors keep piling like feed sacks. In 1976, the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum inducts her into its Western Performers Hall of Fame. Beneath a bronze bust of Will Rogers, she dons a sky blue suit and thanks the board for believing a woman can ride tall in history, not just in script pages. 1995 brings a Fort Worth ceremony at the Cowgirl Hall of Fame, where rodeo queens pin a red rose to her lapel and young trick riders recite happy trails like scripture. She reminds them, courage isn't just hitting the target, it's climbing back after missing. Next comes the Texas Trail of Fame, then television retrospectives, and finally, CMT's 2002 list of 40 greatest women in country music, where Dale lands at number 34, posthumously, yet vibrantly alive in influence. The ranking sparks debate on fan forums, but consensus forms around a simple truth. Without Dale Evans, country music would still twang, yet it might never have learned to pray, to dream, or to wave viewers off with a song that turns farewell into promise. Apple Valley, California, 6 July 1998. Roy Rogers, once the bronzed picture of frontier vigor, lies in a quiet hospice room, the whir of an oxygen pump replacing the applause he'd heard for 6 decades. He has hidden his worsening congestive heart failure for years, aching over rodeos missed and promises half-kept. Dale, holding his weathered hand, whispers the same 3 words she wrote long ago, "Happy trails, partner," as the king of the cowboys draws a final, dust-soft breath. 3 years later, almost to the day, the familiar diagnosis corners her too. Friends notice the sparkle in her eyes dim, as if half the campfire has gone out. On 7 February 2001, she follows him across the last ridge, age 88. Funeral riders carry the couple's boots, toes pointing backward, a cavalry signal that the trail ahead is ridden no more. Beneath twin marble markers at Sunset Hills Memorial Park, Roy and Dale rest side by side. Trigger and Buttermilk cast in bronze keep watch at the gate. Yet television reruns, campfire sing-alongs, and disability advocacy centers still echo with their signatures. A yodeled "Whoa, Nellie," a gospel chord, a mother's plea for every child to be seen. The credits may have rolled, but the reel keeps spinning. Proof that a life filmed in faith never truly fades to black.